How to read a Magic the Gathering card. There's an old adage among Magic the Gathering players that reading the card explains the card. While this is true, it belies the fact that much of the text and symbols on a card are inscrutable to a non-Magic the Gathering player. In a way, learning to read the cards is learning to play Magic the Gathering. The simplest Magic the Gathering card, the basic land, is not so simple once you look into how much information is being conveyed and assumed by this simple piece of cardboard. Let's start with mechanically relevant detail. This card is named Forest. The name of a card represents a discrete game piece that can be represented by a variety of cards that have the same name. The rules may have changed since a specific printing of a card, and the text on that card may have needed to be adjusted to account for this. The current official text of a card is referred to as the Oracle text, and Wizards of the Coast maintains an online database of cards, Gatherer, where you can verify this current official text. In most cases, these changes are for clarity or to adjust old cards so they are in line with how they would be printed today. This could be things like replacing a sentence with a keyword that means the same thing. Cards that used to say, is unaffected by summoning sickness, were updated to say, haste, or applying types retroactively. All hounds are now dogs. Many cards representing nobles were given the noble subtype. In some cases, like Oubliette, the text has been updated so drastically that while the cards are doing effectively the same thing they always did, they now do it in a way that might interact differently with other game rules. Generally speaking, and in most formats, you can have up to 4 cards with the same name in a deck. The most common exception is that you can have any number of basic lands with the same name. There are also a small number of cards that explicitly state that you can have more than the normal number allowed. In some formats, there are cards that are restricted, meaning that you can only have 1 copy of a card with that name. Singleton formats only allowed 1 copy of any cards you would normally be allowed to play 4 copies of. There are a number of cases where cards with apparently different names are treated as having the same name. This mostly applies to cards printed in other languages, but there are exceptions, like Godzilla frames, where the real name of the card is listed as a subtitle, or in-universe reprints of licensed IP Secret Lair cards, which have a tag in the footer indicating they count as the same card. The name of a card can be referred to by other cards. Sometimes, as in the case of the Book of Vile Darkness, other card names are explicitly printed on a card. Sometimes you are directed to choose a card name by a card's effect, like with Pithing Needle or Tamiyo Collector of Tales. Another case where a card's name may be relevant is the Legend rule, which states, if a player controls 2 or more legendary permanents with the same name, that player chooses one of them, and the rest are put in their owner's graveyards. The type line of the card named Forest is basic land, Forest. The type line of a card identifies a number of qualities of that card which may have game-defined interactions and may also be referred to by the effects of other cards. A forest is a land. You can play 1 land on each of your turns. Lands are permanents, which means that when they are played, you place them onto the battlefield under your control. When you put a card onto the battlefield, it becomes a permanent with all of the qualities of that card. The card named Forest is a basic land. Basic is a supertype. As mentioned before, you may have any number of basic land cards with the same name in a deck. There is a basic land type for each of the 5 colors of mana in Magic the Gathering. Forest for green, mountain for red, swamp for black, island for blue, and plains for white. There are 5 basic lands that share a name with the 5 basic land types and also have that basic land type. Having a basic land type means a permanent can be tapped, rotated sideways, to produce mana of the color corresponding to that basic land type. As such, any land permanent of type forest has the activated ability, tap, add 1 green mana. You gain this mana when you tap the permanent to activate the ability and may spend this mana to pay mana costs of that color or generic mana costs. Unspent mana is lost as the game phases change. There are also snow-covered variants of these 5 basic lands that have the snow supertype. Mana produced by snow permanents is snow mana, in addition to whatever color it is, and can therefore be used to pay snow mana costs, in addition to mana costs of that color or generic mana costs. Snow-covered basic lands are still considered basic lands, so you can still have any number of copies of each in a deck. There is currently 1 basic land called Wastes that can be tapped to produce colorless mana. There is a special symbol for colorless mana, and it can be used to pay generic mana costs or to pay the costs that explicitly require colorless mana. Non-basic lands can have basic land types. Zagoth Triumph is a swamp, forest, and island, which means it intrinsically has the abilities those basic land types convey. Each ability is separate, however. You must choose which mana ability you are activating before you tap the land. There are also lands without basic land types. Azorius Guildgate is a land that does not have any basic land types, so its mana ability is explicitly identified in the text of the card. Some lands without basic land type don't even tap to produce mana. Cabaret Courtyard lets you search your library for a basic land to replace itself with, and Dark Depths doesn't really have anything to do with mana at all. There are also some additional implied or computed qualities of cards. While these qualities are not explicitly stated, they could be referred to by other game rules or card effects. This forest has a mana value of 0, so it cannot be cast. It can only be put onto the battlefield by a game effect like you may play one land on your turn by putting it on the battlefield from your hand, or card effect like put a land from your hand onto the battlefield. Worth mentioning, before we move on, almost all rules come with a caveat unless an in-game effect changes this. This is a key feature of Magic the Gathering and why it is so important to understand how every card may be changing the rules. For example, there are cards that allow you to play cards from your graveyard or ignore the legend rule. Despite appearances, a forest is not green. In fact, it is not any color. The general rule is that a card is the color of its casting cost, and lands, having no casting cost, default to having no color. The in-game term for something with no color is colorless. There are a number of cards that give lands a color, but so far, no lands have been printed that are inherently any color. There are 3 notable exceptions to the cards are the colors in their casting cost rule. Cards can have a colored symbol in their type line indicating their color. Cards with the devoid keyword are colorless as a static ability, and cards can have abilities like this card is all colors that override the colors in their casting cost. While a forest is colorless, it does have a color identity of green. The color identity of a card is mostly relevant for formats with commanders and on cards designed for those formats. A forest's color identity is green because it has an ability that explicitly references green mana. Note the M- separating basic land from forest in the type line. Generally, the words to the left of this are the card type, in this case, land. The card type might be important if, for example, a card effect were to ask you to count the number of different card types in a given zone. There are presently 5 permanent card types in Magic the Gathering: land, creature, enchantment, artifact, and planeswalker. It is common for a permanent card to have multiple card types. For example, an enchantment creature or artifact land. That said, we haven't seen a planeswalker with an additional card type yet. To the left of the card types, there may be one or more super type. For example, all basic lands have the basic super type, and the Bident of Thassa, pictured here, has the legendary super type. There are also 2 non-permanent card types, instant and sorcery. Instant and sorcery cards have had super types or subtypes in the past, but have only ever had one card type thus far. That said, there are some cards, like modal double-faced cards or adventure cards, where the additional mode could be another card type. Generally speaking, these are considered to be whichever type the active face or mode happens to be at the time. The frame of a card will often serve as a hint or reminder of some quality of that card. The forest's frame has green piping but a colorless background, which can help you remember that this is a colorless card that relates to green mana. Lands are a bit of an exception for having colored piping, even though they are colorless. A green creature would have a green tinted background for its frame. Generally, this background will match the color of the card, with gold being used for cards that are multiple colors. The piping on frames will typically match the color of a card up to 2 colors, with gold being used for cards with 3 or more colors. Magic cards are also printed with a number of features that don't have any bearing on gameplay, but are worth mentioning. The art is meant to convey what this card would represent in the fiction of the game. The artist is also noted. The set symbol represents which set of cards a particular version of a card comes from, and the set code is a textual representation of the set symbol. The color of the set symbol tells you the rarity of the card, and there is also a textual representation of that rarity. The rarity of a card mostly represents how likely you are to find a card in a booster pack, but within a set, the rarity tends to represent how good a card is compared to the other cards in that set. Basic land and common are effectively the same rarity. The set symbol will be black for basic land or common, silver for uncommon, gold for rare, and orange for mythic rare. I've also seen P for promotional cards, and for some reason L on common non-basic lands, but the rarity doesn't really matter. I wouldn't worry about it unless you were playing a format like Pauper that cares about card rarity for deck construction. The collector number is which card out of the total number of cards in a set this card happens to be. The language of the card is also indicated. This is a black bordered card. Sometimes cards used to have white borders to differentiate printings. Both black and white borders are normal Magic cards. Silver bordered cards are functional as Magic cards, but not allowed in organized play outside of their own limited format. Think of them as automatically banned in all formats unless otherwise stated. The most common silver bordered cards are those from unsets or promotional sets. Silver bordered cards have recently been retired in favor of acorn cards. Cards with an acorn icon in the bottom center of the card. You can absolutely play Constructed Magic with most silver bordered cards or acorn cards, so long as the people you're playing with are okay with it. Alright, I'll admit not all of that was explicitly about the card forest, but my point is that a lot of information is being conveyed or assumed by even the simplest of Magic the Gathering cards. I might not make any more of these videos, so maybe, if you want to learn to play Magic, you should check out Tolarian Community College on YouTube. The professor has a great How to Play Magic the Gathering Learn to Play in about 15 minutes video that doesn't ramble on seemingly indefinitely about one basic land. Probably not worth subscribing to my channel, but a like or share of this video would be kind. If you could follow me on Twitter and like and or reply to my mild Magic the Gathering takes, haikus, and custom cards, that would be great though. I'll probably post there if I ever happen to make another Magic the Gathering related video. Link should be in the description. Thanks for watching!